Hi everybody, it's Miss Marie, and this week for our Crafty Thursdays we are going to be making a habitat picture for an animal that you would see maybe in wild or in the zoo. Everybody should have picked up a craft bag at the library, and in the bag you're going to have a little plastic animal. Mine is a mountain goat. You're going to have a paper that's a printout from our online World Book Encyclopedia. Which shows a bit of the habitat if you'd like to use that as your guide, and tells you some great information about the animal. You're also going to have a square canvas like this, some glue dots, a paintbrush, and some paint. Things that you are going to need from your house will be some newspaper to paint on top of, maybe a paper plate to mix your paint colors on, so a cup of water, and a paper towel to dry your brush off. All right, I'm going to turn this down, and then you can see what I'm working on. All right, so I've got my canvas here. I've got my paints. I've got my picture next to it so I can kind of take a look and see. I've got my animal. So I'm going to start with, I think, since most of my background is blue, I'm going to start with a light blue. I'm going to open up my paints. Get my brush a little bit wet. I think I'm going to mix the blue and the white. So I'll put some blue on this paper here first. Let me see how I like that on the canvas. Yeah, I definitely want to go light. So I'm going to get some white on there too. Get a little bit more blue. And then I'm going to go with some white. You know what? I don't want to get my brush dirty, so I'm just going to use the other part. Put some white on my plate and then dry that off. Now I can mix them. I'm trying to get just a very light blue for the background, and you can go around the corners here too. Dip your brush in there and get that really wet, and that'll help spread this paint a little bit faster. You just have to let it dry a little bit longer. I really like to try new things. And I thought this was fun because our summer theme is animals, tails and tales. And I thought, how interesting would it be to combine learning something about an animal with a craft about the animal? So that's why I picked this one. I'm gonna definitely get some white on there. My brush is not too dirty, so there we go. You really want to do the whole canvas, because even if we're going to go back later and add more white, you want it to be covered with a base of paint, so that the paint shows up a little bit better when you put it on, so that it's more deliberate. It's not just an accident. You did it on purpose. If you have a bigger brush and you want to do this with a bigger brush, you can do that. I like having a lot of control over how much paint is going on there. And keep going on those sides too. Now, depending on what your animal is, your background might be mostly brown, it might be reds and oranges if it's a sunset picture, or if they come from a very warm place, you might want to do that. Mine comes from mountains where it's very cold. So I'm going to keep to this cooler color palette because I think that'll capture better. Now, I don't know if you've noticed in your paint containers, but I gave you basically your primary colors, your blue, yellow, and red. Those can be mixed to make any color you want, really. In your background, you could do blue and yellow to make green. You can do blue and red to make purple. You can do yellow and red to make orange. Then I gave you some white to lighten things, or black to darken things or add outlines, and brown because that's kind of a hard color to get. You could get it if you mix all these together, but I thought it'd be nice, then you can lighten it or darken it as you need to for your background. Okay, so I've got this kind of pretty sky blue color. I'm gonna let that dry. And when it's all dry, I'm going to come back in and put in some puffy clouds, maybe a little light colored mountains in the background, and then closer up some rocks, okay? So let's let that dry first. Okay, so I let mine dry for a while. You can ask your grown-up too if you're allowed to use the hairdryer on a low setting to help it dry a little faster. Now it's all nice and dry, and I'm going to go in and put some fluffy white clouds in here, just like are in my picture. And I have to try to do this upside down, so this is going to be the top of my canvas, and that's going to be the bottom. Let's see, so I can show you how I do my clouds. I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the white paint, just sort of try making some like swishing movements. You don't want it to be too heavy because you want a little bit of the light to come through as it would in nature. I'm kind of making some swirly, swooping motions. Get some paint on there. Some of them are kind of long and flat. Sort of swishing around, making almost like little circles. I'm going to do one more up here. I like to have an odd number instead of even. I think it looks more like nature. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clouds. All right. See those? Yeah. So now I'm going to rinse off my brush. This part's going to be a little bit trickier because I'm going to need to blend some colors. I know I see some, if I do these mountains, I see some browns and some blues. So I'm going to try putting a little bit of both on my plate and mixing them and making some mountains. And then I can make them darker or lighter depending on where I want to go with that. I've got one on my canvas, I'll just wipe that off. It's probably gonna get covered up anyway. Okay, and I'm gonna get some brown. I'm just gonna wipe this so I don't dirty my brown up too much because I'm gonna want to use that later too. Okay. now I'm going to try mixing these two together. You see it comes out to this sort of grayish color almost. It's definitely darker than the brown and darker than the blue. Kind of neat how that happens. So now I'm going to put some mountains in the background. Again, I'm going to try to do this upside down so you can see it. I'm just going to keep on building up on there. Go across that bottom. And we might even want to go back over that with some black. You don't really see, I don't think, any like individual mountains. It's kind of more like just a shape almost in the background. Maybe we can do on the bottoms if we want on the sides too, to make the mountains wrap around. Just do that on the sides. Maybe I'll do it on the bottom too, just to get that to wrap around. Now everybody's is going to be different because you have different animals. So you may be using browns and maybe make some greens for trees. You might have a lot of water around your animals. So you want to use more blues or browns for the water, depending if it's like muddy water or not. So yeah, they'll be all different looks. Okay, so I've got my mountains. Now just to show you, eventually what we're going to be doing is adding my goat in there. So I need to not make the mountains come up too high because there's got to be a little room. So I'm just doing this small amount. Again, you might not have mountains, you might have a jungle. If you've got like a tiger or some other kind of big cat, or you might have, I'm trying to remember what other ones were in there. Water for like an alligator or hippo. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna let that dry for a few minutes and I'll come back. So while I was looking at my picture again, I noticed in the background there's a little bit of snow on those mountains all the way in the background. I want to add that because that's a nice detail that shows you how cold it is there. So I'm going to go in now that my brown parts are dry and put in some little white parts. Just maybe just a tiny little bit up here, maybe down in here a little bit, just to show just a tiny bit of snow all the way in the background. Okay, and then I'm gonna let that dry. All right, I'll wash my brush and let that part dry. All right, so lastly, I'm gonna start painting in these rocks. And they're a bit brighter because they're close to the front of the picture where the light is hitting it. So they're going to be a lighter brown, maybe mixed in with a tiny bit of yellow, some white to lighten it up, and maybe some black to darken it up where the shadows are. So I'm going to try that now. I'm going to just going to go in there. I'll put some on my plate just to try to get the color I want. I'm not going to worry too much about mixing because this is my last part of my project here, so it's okay if I have to mix a little bit. I'm going to start with that and I'll leave the black till the end so I can go back in and darken the areas that I need to. So I'm going to mix it. I like this color that I'm getting here. That looks kind of like a nice rocky color there. It's not white. It's not yellow or brown either. Tiny little bit more brown in there. Okay. And those are going to go over here because those are the foreground. That's where the goat is standing. So I'm just going to kind of paint some rocky shapes. And these are going to go all the way down into the corner because it's not in the background, it's in the foreground. It means it's in the front of the painting. And I can go around the corner if I want to. And this is a rock, so it's going to have some irregular shapes to it. Make sure it's big enough for my goat to stand on. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So now, I'm just going to finish up with some shadowing. Maybe I'll add a little bit back. You know, maybe I'll first go over this just a little bit more. Cover up the background so it's not peeking through too much. I don't think I even need to use the black because I feel like maybe just right here where the goat will stand. Because I feel like there's enough other colors coming through from the background to make that. Let's go around the corner here, wrap it up. Wrap it around. Yeah, I feel like there's enough colors coming through. Make that look pretty natural. The great thing about the paint is if you're not happy with it, you can go back and fix it. And I'm pretty happy with that. And just get a little tiny bit of black in there just to get a little shadow. And I'm going to blend that out too with some of these other colors so it's not too dark. And that's going to kind of go right up in here somewhere where the goat is standing. So he's got a shadow. Maybe I'll paint one more smaller rock here, just so it's obvious it's a rock in the foreground. I'm going to mix all those colors up and paint that like down here. Like I said, yours is going to be very different because you're having different animals from different habitats. And if you don't like using the picture I gave you for your guide, that's okay too. You can make up your own. You can find other pictures in books or on the computer with your grown-ups' permission, and paint a background that you like. Okay, so I've got some nice rocks there in the foreground, which means the front of the picture. These mountains are in the background. And I guess these would be in the background as well, but they're towards the top of the picture. So. All right, so I'm feeling pretty happy with that. I'm gonna let it dry and then I'm gonna show you how to add your final detail. So the last detail for our picture is probably the most important and the most fun. It's our little plastic animal. So I'm gonna put mine right about there. What I've given you are some glue dots. You just peel this plastic part off and there's a little sticky clump of glue. And I gave you about 6 of them. So you could probably use all of them if you like. Let's see. And I put them on the back of the animal and glue them to the canvas. Oh, actually, I only needed 2. You might want to put a few more on there just to make sure it doesn't fall off. And that's it. You don't need to use a hot glue gun or anything because you've got the glue dots. Let's do one more just to make sure my goat doesn't fall off. All right, and there is my goat in his background. He's standing on a rock in the front of a group of mountains that are covered with snow, and the sky is very blue with fluffy clouds. And my mountain goat looks pretty happy. I hope you have a really great time painting whatever animal, scene, and habitat that you have for your animal, and please send me some pictures so that I can see it. All right, enjoy your animal habitat 3D painting. See, I call it 3D because this is just flat, but then we've made it 3D by adding the plastic animal on there and it pops out, right? All right, enjoy.